There was a woman who was known as the most famous blonde in the world. Everyone recognized her face. Everyone remembered her smile, the white dress blowing in the wind, the red lips, the slightly slow way she spoke, and even that expression, as if she naturally belonged to every gaze fixed upon her. People always made the same mistake when they looked at her. Someone that beautiful, someone loved by so many people, must have been happy. But on the night she was found, at the end of that glamorous name, there was no applause, no lights, no one. A locked bedroom door, medication scattered across the room, a silence, with no explanation, and then a conclusion that came far too quickly. That was the official conclusion. That was all they said. But strangely, it was only after that that the questions began to grow. Who was the last person to see her? Who was the last person to speak to her? And why? Does the timeline of that night never seem to fully connect? Some people say she wasn't alone. Others say she had learned too much, and something may have happened behind the scenes. Of course, no evidence ever confirmed any of this. But somehow, her story has never once felt truly finished. This is the story of a woman who was once an icon of her time, and why, after that night, she left behind even more questions. Her name was Marilyn Monroe, and perhaps this is not just the story of what happened that night, but the story of how she had been slowly falling apart long before anyone noticed. And maybe that is where this story truly begins. The name Marilyn Monroe is so powerful that people often feel as if she was born that way, but she wasn't. From the beginning, she was not Marilyn Monroe. Her real name was Norma Jean, and the life she lived under that name was far removed from the glamorous image the world remembers. She did not grow up in a stable home. Her mother struggled with instability, and her father was never clearly known. So, as a child, Norma Jean was never someone who stayed in one place for long. Foster homes, another house, another room. Her childhood was often described as a life of temporary belonging. Today here, tomorrow somewhere else. In some homes, she was treated kindly. In others, she lived carefully, watching, trying not to disturb anything, trying not to be a problem, trying not to be noticed too much. Because sometimes, being noticed meant being sent away. Not every detail has been clearly recorded, but one thing seems certain. From a very young age, she learned, not with words, but through experience, that the world could push her away at any time, and that feeling never really left her. Maybe that's why. People who knew her later once said something like this. Even when Marilyn was surrounded by people, she carried the expression of someone who might be abandoned at any moment. It's a strange thought. The most desired woman in the world. And yet, inside, she was still a child, afraid of being left behind. Norma Jean may have learned very early on that to be loved, she had to become what others wanted. She had to be gentle. She had to look beautiful. She had to smile in a way that pleased others. And maybe that smile was not something she was born with, but something she built slowly, carefully, out of fear. The fear that she could not remain in someone's heart as she truly was. That fear may have created the smile the world loved, and at the same time, a quiet anxiety that never truly disappeared. And when people look back on her life, many of them say this. It feels like she had already been acting long before she became a star, not in front of a camera, but to survive, to be loved, to not be abandoned. The world often describes the birth of a star as something like destiny, but when you look closer, what people call destiny is usually made from coincidence, necessity, and desire. In Norma Jean's case, it was no different. In her early years, she was working at a factory. During the war, a photographer was assigned to capture images of factory workers. And that's when he noticed her. At first, it meant nothing, just another photograph, just another moment. But something about her stood out. Not just beauty, not just appearance, something else, something harder to explain. From that moment on, her life began to shift. At first, it was only a few photos, then more, then attention, then opportunity. And suddenly, she was no longer just another girl working in a factory, but somehow, the camera seemed to love her. Or maybe she had already learned how to be loved by something that was watching her. From there, she began working as a model, and slowly, she stepped into Hollywood. It was during this time that the name Norma Jean began to fade. In its place, a new name was given. Marilyn Monroe, bright blonde hair, more defined makeup, a carefully crafted smile, a voice that flowed just a little slower. None of this happened naturally. In fact, many say it was shaped with remarkable intention. She studied herself, she adjusted herself, she refined herself, over and over again. She created a face for the camera, she practiced how to smile for reporters, she even knew exactly which angle made her look the most radiant. People often say Marilyn Monroe was a natural star, but those who saw her closely sometimes said something else. She wasn't born a star, she performed being a star every moment. That sentence speaks not only of her brilliance, but also of her quiet tragedy. Because people loved Marilyn Monroe, but they may never have loved Norma Jean, and she likely knew that. And knowing that means something changes inside you, something small at first, but something that keeps growing. From that point on, a quiet fracture began to grow inside her life. The world wanted more of her, but what it wanted was not who she truly was. It wanted the image, and the more the world wanted it, the harder it became to separate who she was from who she had to be. There are stories that sometimes, while standing among people, her expression would suddenly fade, as if a switch had been turned off. One moment, she was Marilyn Monroe, and the next, when no one was watching, she would become someone else entirely. Quiet, distant, almost invisible. Whether that story is entirely true or something added later, no one can say for certain, but somehow, it feels too real to ignore. She was one of the brightest lights in the world, but perhaps, to keep shining, she had to keep pushing herself. And maybe, that was the cost of becoming someone the world could never stop watching. The reason Marilyn Monroe didn't remain just another pretty actress was simple. The moment she appeared, everything changed. The air shifted, the attention moved, the scene belonged to her. She became deeply embedded in the public's memory through multiple films. And some of those moments are still talked about even now. In Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she stands on stage wearing a bright pink dress. The lights, the music, the movement, everything seems to follow her. That scene is impossible to describe with just the word beautiful. She looks like someone who fully understands what the world wants and knows exactly how to give it. People saw her as sensual, and at the same time, they described her as innocent. That contradiction is what made her impossible to ignore. Then came the 7-year itch, the iconic moment. Standing above a subway grate, her white dress lifting in the air. That image didn't just become famous, it became history. People laughed, cheered, watched, and remembered. But behind that moment, there are other stories, stories that feel very different. During filming, a massive crowd gathered around her. Not hundreds, thousands, watching, waiting, reacting to every movement. It's said that while she smiled and played the moment perfectly, inside, something felt wrong. Too many eyes, too much attention, too much expectation. Something that's harder to explain. There are also stories that this moment created tension in her personal life, that someone close to her could not accept what the world saw, could not accept how she was being seen. And from that moment, some say, things began to shift, not suddenly, but slowly, quietly, like something cracking beneath the surface. And once it started, it never fully stopped. A star's life always draws people in. Those who love them, those who need them, those who use them, and those who watch from a distance. Marilyn Monroe was surrounded by all of them. She married a famous baseball player. She married a playwright. From the outside, her life looked glamorous, perfect, almost unreal. But up close, those relationships never seemed to last. Perhaps she wanted stability. Perhaps she wanted something real. But at the same time, it's possible that no one truly understood her. And as time passed, more and more rumors began to follow her. The most famous ones involved the Kennedy family, John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, power, politics, private meetings, unconfirmed conversations. Some say she was closer to that world than people realized. Some say she had access to things she was never meant to know, things that were not meant to be repeated, not meant to be remembered. Of course, none of this was ever proven. But that's exactly why the stories never disappeared, because there were gaps, too many unanswered details. Some even say she spoke about things she shouldn't have spoken about, that she mentioned names, that she referenced conversations, that she hinted at things that made people uncomfortable. And once those stories began to spread, they never stopped, because now she was no longer just a star. She was something else, someone who may have known too much. There are also stories that in the days before that night, she had changed, not dramatically, but noticeably. Small things, subtle shifts, but enough for people to remember. That she spoke more sharply, that she became more sensitive, that something was bothering her in a way she couldn't explain. Some say after meeting certain people, she seemed different, more alert, more uneasy, as if she was trying to understand something, or perhaps trying to protect herself from something she couldn't see clearly. And then there are the stories about the notes, that she wrote things down, names, phone numbers, fragments of conversations, not in a clear way, not in a structured way, but in pieces, as if she was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. Some even say those notes were not meant to be read by others, but meant to remind herself, to keep track of something important, something she was afraid to forget. Whether those notes ever truly existed, where they went, who may have seen them, and what they contained, none of it was ever confirmed. But somehow, people still believe those stories, because when something feels incomplete, people try to fill in the blanks. And in her case, there are too many blanks, too many missing pieces, and too many reasons to keep asking questions. Now, we return to the night that people still question the most, the night between August 4th and August 5th, 1962. Marilyn Monroe was at her home in Los Angeles. Her house, like her image, was carefully arranged, beautiful, controlled, quiet. But when people imagine that night, everything feels unnaturally still. Outside, nothing seemed unusual. Inside, there was silence. But within that silence, something doesn't sit right. Stories differ about what happened that night. Some say she seemed anxious since the evening. Others say she appeared calmer than usual. Some say she made several phone calls. Others say she was waiting for one. Some even say there were calls that were never fully recorded, voices that were never clearly explained. What is certain is this: nothing is completely certain. From the very beginning, the records do not align cleanly. Who called her? At what time? Who saw her? Who was in the house? Even the most basic timeline fails to connect smoothly, and in those gaps, people began to imagine more. Was someone with her that night? Was she arguing with someone? Or had she learned something and was living in fear because of it? Some people look at her condition and say, it could have happened. She had long relied on medication. Her emotions were unstable. She often could not sleep. There were nights when rest simply wouldn't come, and days that felt heavier than they should. But others say that very fact makes everything more questionable, because when someone is already fragile, their final moments can be explained too easily, too quickly, too simply. And from that point, her house became something else. Not just a place, but a space filled with interpretations. A place where every small detail began to matter. The bedroom door was said to be locked from the inside, but even that detail is not always told the same way. Who noticed first? Who looked inside? Who decided to open the door? Each version changes slightly, just enough to feel uncertain, as if what happened that night never settled into a single story, as if the truth shifted, depending on who was telling it. And when the door was finally opened, she was there, on the bed, still, too still, unnaturally quiet, no movement, no response, just silence filling the room. And in that silence, something began. Not answers, but questions. After she was found, the story did not end. In fact, that's when it truly began. The official cause was described as a medical conclusion, and everything seemed to be explained very quickly. Too quickly, for some people, because almost immediately, questions appeared. Small at first, then more, and then too many to ignore. Who found her? At what exact time? Who was already there? Who arrived later? Who made the calls? Who answered them? Even these details change depending on who tells the story. Some say it was the housekeeper. Others say her doctor was already aware. Some even suggest someone else may have been there before anything was officially reported. And then there are the details of the scene itself. If everything was exactly as it was described, then why do some parts feel incomplete? The amount of medication, her physical condition, the timing, the sequence of events. Each one leaves a small gap. And when those gaps are placed together, they form something larger. Not answers, only doubt. Not clarity, only questions. Like a puzzle that looks finished, but doesn't quite fit. And once you see those gaps, it becomes impossible to ignore them. Marilyn Monroe's life reached its end that night, but in many ways, her story changed form from that moment. Officially, what happened was explained as a tragic conclusion, and for many people, that explanation is enough. But for others, it never was, because her life was never simple, and neither was that night. Some believe it was the end of someone who had simply become too exhausted. Others believe something more may have happened behind the scenes, something unseen, something that never made it into the official story, something that was never meant to be told, and those two ideas have never fully separated. Even now, decades later, the questions remain, not louder, but deeper. And maybe the truth was never meant to be simple, because sometimes a story doesn't end when a life does. Sometimes it transforms, becomes something else, something people return to again and again, trying to understand what really happened. And maybe that is why Marilyn Monroe is still remembered not just as a star, but as a mystery that was never fully explained. Even after that night, the fascination around her never truly disappeared. Even decades later, her presence never disappeared. That white dress, the one that lifted above the subway grate, was later sold for an extraordinary price. A number so high, it almost feels unreal. It became one of the most expensive dresses ever sold in the world, as if even a single moment of her image still carries power. And then there is another story, one that people still talk about. It is said that a wealthy man once paid an enormous amount to secure a burial space right next to her. Not for fame, not for attention, but simply to remain beside her, even after everything had already ended. Whether that story is entirely true or not, no one can say for certain, but somehow, it feels like something that could only happen around someone like Marilyn Monroe. Was she alone that night? Or was there something we were never meant to fully understand? We may never know. Not everything is meant to be explained. But one thing is certain, her story was never buried as just another moment in the past. Because even now, people still return to that night. Again and again, trying to understand what really happened, and every time they arrive at the same question. Marilyn Monroe, was she really alone that night? If this story left you wondering, the next one is waiting for you. Subscribe and stay with us.